The talks have been given the name Sleeve Notes from Mono to Infinity, and that kind of expresses what it's all about. It's about the history of Abbey Road Studios. It's a lot of it's also about my activities here over the years, and it's moderated by journalistic genius David Hepworth. So I'm really looking forward to his contribution to it as well.
Whilst a lot of people know that you were involved with working here with the Beatles and Pink Floyd and Pilot and Ambrosia, and obviously setting up your own musical endeavour with the Alan Parsons project, I think what a lot of people don't know is that actually at some point, was it in the 90s, that you were actually in charge of Abbey Road Studios, weren't you?
That is a little known fact. It's because I didn't last very long. I kind of ran away screaming after about 9 months.
But you were, in fact, in charge of the whole thing.
I was the boss, yeah. And it wasn't just Abbey Road, it was the Townhouse and Olympic and the Manor Mobiles as well, all of which have now disappeared, through no fault of my own, I hesitate to add. But yeah, it was essentially an executive job, in that, you know, I was given leave of absence to go and play live shows while still being the chief executive here, but it wasn't for me, and I retired gracefully, and, you know, slightly with my tail between my legs, but you know, I retired gracefully.
I mean, we were going to talk about your musical endeavours, but do you feel that you're as intrinsically linked with Abbey Road Studios as people sort of who look at what you've done would think you are?
Abbey Road is home. I mean, it always was. Everything, you know, every aspect of my career started here. I started here as tape librarian, then as assistant engineer, then as engineer, then as producer, and then as artist. I mean, it all fundamentally took shape here. And yeah, I absolutely love coming back and you know, reliving the memories. It's great.
How old were you when you started work here?
19.
19. How did you get the job? I mean, we both know jobs in the music industry are very difficult to get regardless. But back when you were 19, how did one even go about getting a job you got?
I was in the fortunate position of having a job with EMI in another department. I worked in Hayes in Middlesex, where their record factory was. They also had a department called Tape Records, which is where I worked. And that was a department making reel-to-reel copies of EMI's product. I mean, everything was out there, you know, Revolver by the Beatles, Piper at the Gates of Dawn by Pink Floyd, all released on these reel-to-reel plastic spools about that size. And one of the jobs was to make duplicates of master tapes for the production of those tapes, and also to make copies for foreign factories, for record factories outside the UK. It's all done electronically now. It's a piece of cake. You just buzz it through to every factory that needs it. But back then, you had to make a tape copy of the masters for other factories. So that was part of the job as well. And so Tape Records and Abbey Road Studios were intrinsically linked. And so I just managed to choose the right day to write a letter to the boss here, Alan Stagg at the time, and said, please, can I come and work at the studios? I think I'm qualified. Granted me an interview. 2 weeks later, I was working here.
Fantastic. Because I've been down. I've been to Hayes. We were actually talking about it earlier, and I was saying that what blew my mind in a way was that they have every kind of tape machine for anything that EMI ever recorded, because if they ever want to reproduce it, they have to be able to play the original.
It's true.
And literally you get walked. It was like the size of 2 football pitches, I think, and kept at a certain level. And it was kind of like, what are all these archaic machines? And it was explained to us. It was like, well, we need to be able to sort of play. It's the same way that David Gilmour's Houseboat, the Astoria's got the old tape machines at the Floyd albums. Mm-hmm. That you'd have worked on.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is that the quarter-inch tape had an enormously long life compared with, say, some of the more modern digital formats. I mean, you try and find a machine to play an ADAT on now, or a Tascam 8-track, or you remember the Betamax format?
This week only they announced they were going to stop. I've got to be honest, I didn't even realise they were still producing them, but yeah.
There was a system called F1, which was recorded on Betamax format. It became a sort of predecessor to DAT. As another disappeared format. And you're right. You've got to hold on to these machines that can play that.
Well, one question I do want, I'm intrigued by, because obviously, we know what you've worked on at Abbey Road. What was the studios like back then, compared with what we're sat in now?
A bit more like a hospital, to be honest. It was very, very dreary decor here. The walls were green and cream, as I remember, and. Yeah, it wasn't a very foreboding building at all, but it had the legends. It had all the great music that came from here, from Cliff and the Shadows to Helen Shapiro to Frankie Vaughan to Pinky and Perky to huge names in classical music like Otto Klemper, Daniel Barenboim, all these people. I mean, just everybody who is anybody in music has been here at some point or other.
When you worked here, was it just Studio 1 and Studio 2? Did 3 exist at that point?
Oh yes, 3. No, 3 was very much a part. The new one is the one on the roof, the penthouse.
Right.
That was built later on. But no, ever since I was here, it was always 3 studios.
I did a corporate talk in Studio 1 a couple of years ago, and when I told people that actually this is half the size of the actual studio, if you move those doors, it goes, and they were gobsmacked. And I said, well, largely the reason is because if you want to record an orchestra, you've got to fit them in. And that's kind of the big, I said, but these days, I said, over there is Studio 2 where the Beatles recorded, which is much smaller than this. I said, Studio 3 is even smaller. Recording studios these days are tiny compared. And people were gobsmacked by the idea that actually where they were sat having a dinner could be so big. I mean, would that pretty much when you started out with they big?
Oh, I was absolutely awestruck by the size of Number One Studio. I mean, it is huge. I think it probably is the largest purpose-built studio in the world. But it had to be, when you not just full orchestra. Sometimes a full orchestra and chorus. You might have 500 singers in there as well as 150 orchestral players. So it needs to be a big space. And that acoustic in Number One is magical. I mean, so many great film soundtracks, Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark, all recorded in there as well as all the classical music that's legendary coming out of there.